Welcome to Whispers and Confessions. There might be a twist waiting, so please make sure to watch until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Let's begin right away.
We kissed passionately like we did when we first fell in love, my hand finding its way beneath her black dress, caressing her with gentle devotion. She responded in kind, her touches becoming more intimate with each passing moment. Hi, I'm Ivan, a 36-year-old project manager working at a tech company in a small Texas town. My wife, Karen, who's 33, has been my life partner for nearly a decade now. Life was cruising along smoothly, maybe a little too smoothly. Looking back, that comfortable routine had slowly morphed into something less exciting. Everything changed one regular Friday night. Karen was chilling on the couch, scrolling through her phone when she suddenly perked up. "Ivan, check this out," she said, flashing me an intriguing smile. She showed me a message from what we'd thought was just a community social club. The message stopped me in my tracks. Ready to spice things up? How about a couple swap night? Push some boundaries. I felt my cheeks burn as I looked at Karen, expecting to see her laughing it off. Instead, I saw genuine curiosity in her eyes. "You can't be serious." I tried to play it cool, but my shaky voice gave me away. She gave a casual shrug. "Why not? Could be interesting. Shake things up a bit. It's not like we have to go crazy, Ivan. Think of it as an adventure." Truth be told, I was freaked out. I'm more of a play it safe kind of guy, always have been. But watching Karen talk about it with such enthusiasm made me second guess myself. What if we just go as observers? I suggested carefully. She took a slow sip of wine and smiled. "Sure, we'll just dip our toes in and see what happens." A week later, we got all the details about the party. The venue was this gorgeous mansion out in the suburbs, totally private, away from prying eyes. Brian and Susan, the hosts, had always been the wild cards of our social circle. Walking in that night felt like stepping onto a movie set. The lighting was perfect, all soft and warm, with candles everywhere and smooth jazz playing in the background. The other couples were already there, everyone dressed to the nines. Karen looked absolutely stunning in this black dress that showed off her figure perfectly. I noticed quite a few heads turning her way. "Don't worry, I'm all yours tonight," she whispered, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. Her words helped, but there was still this weird tension in the air. Brian came over with that big smile of his, cocktails in hand. "Hey, glad you guys made it. Remember, no pressure. Tonight's all about doing whatever feels right." Karen was already in her element, sipping wine and chatting away with James and Lisa, friends we'd known forever. I figured I might as well join in. "Talk about stepping out of your comfort zone," James muttered under his breath. "Lisa talked me into this one." Lisa just grinned and raised her glass. "Hey, life's too short not to shake things up once in a while, right?" I tried to smile back, but my mind was going a million miles an hour. The whole situation felt heavy, yet there was this electric feeling in the air I couldn't explain. At 10 p.m., Brian called everyone's attention. He stood in the middle of the room with Susan by his side, both looking totally relaxed. "Ready to get this party started?" he asked smoothly. "Rules are simple, dance, swap partners if you want, but watching is totally fine too. Zero pressure." Some folks chuckled while others exchanged knowing looks. Karen squeezed my hand. "Let's stick to watching," she whispered, just like we'd planned. As the music kicked in, couples started getting up to dance. I watched James and Lisa gracefully switch partners with Brian and Susan. I thought Karen would stay put, but suddenly I saw something shift in her expression. "Maybe just one dance?" she asked, her voice soft but determined. I hesitated. "With who?" She glanced around until her eyes landed on David. He was older, distinguished looking with his silver hair and gentleman's demeanor. As Karen walked over, David flashed a warm smile and held out his hand. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I nodded anyway. "It's okay. Just one dance," I managed to say. masking the twinge of jealousy in my voice. While Karen swayed with David, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. It was Susan, flashing me a warm smile. "Come on, Ivan, let's have some fun too. It's just dancing." I took her hand and we began moving across the floor, but my eyes kept drifting to Karen. Though she was dancing casually with David, something about their closeness made my stomach knot up. The way his hand rested on her waist, the subtle smiles they exchanged. "Take it easy," Susan said, picking up on my tension. "Karen's your girl. This is all just for fun." But was it? When the music faded and everyone drifted back to their spots, something felt different. Some couples seemed to have a new spark between them. Karen came back to me with flushed cheeks and eyes that sparkled with excitement. "Just dancing," she said softly, reading the concern on my face. I nodded, but deep down I knew we'd crossed some invisible line, one that wouldn't be easy to uncross. Brian, clearly sensing the charged atmosphere, suggested we move things along with some partner swap games in the next room. Several couples jumped at the idea, grinning knowingly. Karen's hand found my arm. "What do you think?" she asked, her tone almost daring me to say yes. "All right," I replied, my throat tight with anticipation. We followed the others into a room where a card game was laid out. The concept was straightforward. Each card had either a question or a playful challenge for the couples. Somehow Karen ended up next to David again, making my heart race, while Susan settled in beside me with that same friendly smile. As we played, the challenges grew more adventurous. Sexual tension filled the air. Then came the moment that made my world stop. Karen drew a card that read, "Kiss the person next to you." The room went dead quiet as I stared at her. She caught my eye briefly, silently asking for permission, before turning back to David, who offered a subtle smile. "It's just part of the game, Ivan," she whispered. My heart hammered against my ribs. This had definitely crossed the line from just a game into something else entirely. When Karen's eyes met David's again, I saw a shift in them. This wasn't just playful curiosity anymore. She was taking this seriously, and I found myself torn between wanting to put a stop to everything and a burning curiosity to see what would happen next. "Well, Karen," David murmured, leaning in closer. Everyone watched, holding their breath, waiting to see how this would play out. Karen hesitated, glancing at me one last time as if hoping I'd intervene, but I stayed frozen in place. Then, with deliberate slowness, she smiled and brought her lips to meet his. The kiss lasted mere seconds, but time seemed to stand still. My pulse roared in my ears like a freight train. When they broke apart, the room erupted in whoops and applause, as if this was just another party game. But for me, everything had shifted. Karen pulled back with blushing cheeks and downcast eyes. "Don't read too much into it, Ivan. It's still just a game," Karen whispered as she returned to my side. I nodded mechanically, but something fierce was burning in my chest. Pure, raw jealousy. Watching her in another man's embrace had awakened something primal in me, something I never knew existed. After the game wrapped up, Brian invited several couples upstairs to what he called the trust room, a spacious area with dim lighting and plush sofas. Some couples had already made their way up there, and you could feel the shift in energy, more intimate, more permissive. The only rule was simple. Couples could connect, but only if everyone involved agreed. "Want to check it out?" Karen asked, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Right then, I could have easily said no and walked away. We could have chalked this up to a crazy night and gone back to our regular lives. But looking at my wife, I saw something had awakened in her, a curiosity, passion, and sense of freedom I hadn't witnessed in years. "Okay," I answered, my voice tight with nervous energy. We climbed the stairs slowly, my palms cold and clammy with anticipation. The private room had an unexpectedly intimate vibe. Several couples were already deep in hushed conversations or cozied up together. The atmosphere was electric, like everyone had dropped their usual social masks and was letting their true selves show. Karen guided me to a plush sofa, where David and his wife Nancy joined us. Nancy flashed me a warm smile, her eyes twinkling with mischief. She had this natural charisma about her that was hard to ignore. "Holding up okay?" Nancy asked, leaning in close. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Meanwhile, David had turned his attention back to Karen, and something about the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, made my stomach do flips. I felt both unsettled and weirdly intrigued. Without warning, Nancy's hand found its way to my knee. I shot her a startled look, but she just smiled knowingly. "Relax, Ivan. Tonight's all about exploring new territory," she purred, her voice barely above a whisper. My palms were getting clammy, and my heart was racing. When I glanced at Karen, I caught her smiling, a free, uninhibited smile I hadn't seen in ages. "You trust her, right?" Nancy's question hung in the air. "I do," I replied, though my voice wavered. Nancy inched closer, her perfume lingering in the space between us. As Nancy pushed my boundaries, David seemed to be doing the same with Karen. For the first time that night, I seriously considered crossing that invisible line. Maybe it was the wine talking, or the charged atmosphere, or just the building tension, but reality started feeling more and more distant. Karen and David were lost in conversation while Nancy stayed close, her touches growing bolder by the minute. "Getting nervous, Ivan?" she teased. Before I could respond, Karen stood up with David at her side. Seeing them together like that made my heart sink. "Need some fresh air," Karen announced without meeting my eyes. As David followed her out, I watched them disappear through the door. I could have jumped up and called the whole thing off right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride, curiosity, or just Nancy's magnetic presence. "Don't sweat it," she whispered, seeing right through me. "Karen's discovering herself. Maybe you should too." Nancy laced her fingers through mine and pressed herself against my arm. Her touch caught me off guard. When our eyes met, the intensity in her gaze completely threw me off balance. The door swung open, and Karen walked back in. Her cheeks were flushed, and there was something different about her eyes. She settled next to me with a smile. "You good?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She just nodded and ran her fingers along my leg. "Everything's perfect, Ivan." Karen was back, but something had shifted. Her face was glowing, her eyes sparkling with something I couldn't quite read. It was like something wild had awakened in her, something beyond my control. David rejoined us, taking his spot beside Nancy, who was still giving me that knowing smile. The silence that followed felt endless, even though it only lasted seconds. Karen squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's okay." Her voice was sweet as ever, but carried this new confidence I'd never heard before. I attempted a smile, but my heart was pounding. A whirlwind of emotions swept through me: jealousy, desire, and this gnawing curiosity about what had transpired between Karen and David outside. Nancy, picking up on my unease, traced her fingers down my arm. "Sometimes we need to get lost to truly find ourselves," she murmured softly. David sat there with an easy smile, as if this whole situation was the most natural thing in the world. The tension in the room was electric, but nobody dared make the first move. We were all testing each other's limits. "How about another round of wine?" David suggested, breaking through the thick silence. We nodded in agreement, and once again, he and Karen stood to leave. This time, I felt myself freeze in place as they walked out together. Nancy leaned in closer, her perfume washing over me like a wave. "Can't you see what's happening?" she whispered. "See what?" I managed to get out. "Your wife. She's discovering parts of herself she never knew existed." "And what about you? What are you discovering?" Her words jolted me. She was right. This wasn't just some party game anymore. Something profound was unfolding in Karen. She seemed more alive than I'd seen her in years, practically glowing with newfound confidence. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up, leaving Nancy behind, and headed out. The hallway to the backyard terrace was quiet, with just a cool breeze rustling through. That's when I spotted them. Karen was sitting in the garden with David right beside her. He was speaking in hushed tones, and her laughter, genuine and carefree, floated through the air. The sight of them together made my heart hammer against my ribs. A storm of emotions raged inside me: anger, jealousy, but also something unexpected: desire. Our eyes locked across the garden. Karen didn't look guilty or embarrassed. Instead, there was something almost provocative in her gaze, like she was daring me to make the next move. David, ever the gentleman, noticed me and quietly excused himself. I approached her slowly, my heart thundering in my chest. Karen greeted me with a subtle smile. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Karen, what's really going on here?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. She rose and moved toward me, her eyes sparkling in the darkness. "What about you, Ivan? Why did you come out here?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "You wanted this, to see me like this, to test how far I'd go, how far we both could go." Her words hit home. She was right. Deep down, I had wanted to see this side of Karen: confident, vibrant, free. Some primal part of me needed to push these boundaries, to see what lay beyond our comfortable routine. And now here we stood, all pretenses stripped away, facing each other in the raw truth of the moment. Karen cupped my face tenderly in her hands and leaned in close enough that I could feel her warm breath on my skin. "I'm yours, Ivan, but you have to prove it. Do you still want me?" she whispered. Her words struck me, and suddenly everything clicked into place. This whole night had been a test, not just for her, but for both of us. In that moment of clarity, I knew exactly what I wanted. I pulled her close and kissed her with a passion I never knew I had in me. My heart was on fire for her. Seeing these new facets of her personality had stirred up a cocktail of emotions: jealousy and uncertainty, mixed with an overwhelming surge of love and desire that had been lying dormant for too long. What I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced before. It went beyond mere physical attraction. I wanted to know every inch of her soul, to understand every subtle nuance of her being. Lost in our own world, I barely registered our surroundings, though thankfully the garden provided us with the perfect cover of darkness and privacy. We kissed passionately like we did when we first fell in love, my hand finding its way beneath her black dress, caressing her with gentle devotion. She responded in kind, her touches becoming more intimate with each passing moment. Her soft sighs of pleasure filled the night air, igniting something primal within me. I realized I hadn't experienced such raw, powerful emotions in ages. Her beauty and allure, which had somehow gotten lost in our day-to-day routine, now awakened every fiber of my being. As she guided me to the secluded garden bench, we lost ourselves in each other, discovering a profound connection that transcended the physical. In those precious hours, years of dormant passion had suddenly sprung to life with an intensity one never thought possible. The drive home at dawn was quiet but heavy with emotion. Karen's hands stayed locked in mine as she nestled against me, with a telling smile that spoke volumes. My thoughts kept drifting back to the events that had unfolded, each memory more vivid than the last. When we reached our doorstep, Karen turned to face me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you understand now?" she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I do," I replied, finally grasping the deeper meaning of everything that had transpired. That night marked a profound transformation in our relationship. It wasn't just about the raw emotions of jealousy or physical desire. It was an incredible journey of self-discovery, both as individuals and as a couple. For the first time in years, we felt an electric sense of being truly present and alive. Back in our living room, we connected on a deeper level, taking our time to explore and appreciate each other with renewed passion. Rather than threatening our marriage, this boundary-pushing experience had unveiled layers of our relationship we never knew existed. Sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone to truly understand your limits and desires. That night taught us that genuine love and desire run deeper than any social experiment or game. Karen hadn't crossed any lines. Instead, she had shown us that together, we could push our boundaries while staying true to our connection. Looking back, this intense experience undeniably strengthened our bond. We emerged with a deeper understanding of each other and a newfound trust that breathed fresh energy into our marriage. What could have been risky became transformative, proving that sometimes the greatest growth comes from facing our fears together.